How's it going, my good friends? It's your new best friend, Efren Tinoco, coming at you just south of where I usually come at you from. I am no longer in North Memphis. I am in northern Midtown Memphis, more specifically Overton Park. Those of you who are in Memphis know that we are blessed with ample, well-appointed parks. And there's a number of people uh, walking in my vicinity that are enjoying the park themselves. I used to come here a lot, or I used to be brought here a lot as a kid. We have the zoo in these environs just north of here, about really halfway between here, where I'm coming at you from, and where I live. Um, and actually, you can see behind me is a statue of the Memphis Belle. We're at the Veterans Plaza, and around you can see the famous doughboy with the plaque of all the Shelby County residents who um, gave their life fighting in World War II. So it's hot. It's what, Sunday the 19th, and it's about 8 p.m. and it's just hot. Summers here in Memphis is, if y'all don't know, some of y'all know because you've been here to visit me. This is terrible, absolutely terrible. But anyway, when I was between 8th and ninth grade, my dad took a couple weeks off work, and I remember we drove us down all the way down to Mexico City from here in Memphis, me and my two younger brothers, and I was coming up into high school. So I was old enough to appreciate a few things by this time. And in a park, I guess a great deal bigger than Overton Park, where we are here. Um, it's called the Park of Chapultepec, which houses the largest public university in the Western Hemisphere. I think it's largest. I don't know if Brazil has anything larger than UNAM, 500,000 people. Basically, the New Mexico federal institution that um, drives that tremendous that satisfies the requirements for the bureaucracy of Mexico. Um, but in it, there was a big park and different than this, because we just had different vegetation, of course. But in that very large park, where the castle is also, is their fine arts. We have our fine arts institution over here, Brooks Museum of Art in the distance. Yep, all the way down this pathway. But uh, the National Art Museum is there, and they had a display of Picasso, and had a number of small, like less than a half a foot square to very large portraits of Picasso. Well, that was one of two things that really struck my attention. The big thing was that there was I'll try to keep this camera steady. Uh, there was a jazz band with the bass flute. This beautiful sound, bass flute. But the other thing was this Picasso exhibit. And what really got to me was that about every third picture in this Picasso exhibit was a rendition of a naked woman urinating. I am dead serious. I'm not making this up. How can I make that up? How can I make that up? Seriously, every third picture or so was actually named woman urinating, mujer orinando. I'm not kidding you. I'm straight serious. So I was old enough to know that this guy was a freak. Picasso was an absolute freak. And I don't know. Maybe it could be that maybe Donald Trump likes the Pablo Picasso suite at some hotel in Moscow. Okay, let me stop. But anyway, But these were all very, small, like you can carry them, paintings of Picasso's. But the famous one is one that's about 11 and a half feet tall and 25 feet wide, called Guernica. It's a rendition of the suffering and calamity of the people as it was being bombed by the town of Guernica in the Basque part of Spain near France, on the coast, where Italian and Nazi people were bombing this town. Planes were bombing the town. And it's actually, if you saw it, you'd recognize it, I promise you, almost as readily as you would recognize the Mona Lisa. The real one sits in Madrid. There's a tapestry that was donated by the Rockefeller Foundation that's actually at the entrance of the UN Security Council, and it is there to it is there to warn the members of the Security Council about how serious their charge is to avoid the human suffering of others. Of course, statesmen don't suffer for the most part. The effects of war, but people do. And so this is to remind them of that suffering. You may remember a speech that Colin Powell gave, where he had to just sit up there and lie to the entire world, as a good soldier, being told by his bosses, I guess, Bush and Cheney, what to say, that in the Saharan country of Niger, that they were shipping yellow cake, which is uranium ore, to Saddam Hussein, was turning it into weapons of mass destruction, which was a fabrication. That was a complete fabrication. And he got up there and said it. I think he's saying he did not know. But anyway, what of this? What he was saying this? Well, when he was giving this speech, the tapestry of Guernica at the United Nations was actually covered up in a blue drape. So people didn't see this image before they went and heard this speech. When they walked by, past Security Council, I guess, into the General Assembly. That's tough. That's tough. It goes to show you. This is 2001. We were determined to go to war. No, it was 2003. It's 2003. We were already involved with the Taliban, and we were trying to expand the operation into Iraq and involve Saddam Hussein with the actions of Al-Qaeda, which turned out to be a total fabrication, especially with respect to weapons of mass destruction. Well, so that was my tie from Parks to that. Let's be real. In the United States, we are given a redacted version of what our role is in foreign interventions. When I was studying history, Latin American history, and diplomatic history, as an undergrad, and diplomatic history as a graduate student, I was exposed to a lot of details about United States covert and overt military intervention and campaigns and battles ever since basically shortly after we became, a generation after we became an independent country from Great Britain. We've been sticking our nose where maybe it shouldn't have been for the longest time. Starting with the War of 1812, you can say, we tried to take the fight to Great Britain. It was almost a foregone conclusion that we were going to take Ontario, away from Great Britain and annex it as a U.S. territory. But the truth was that we proved to be very, very incompetent as a fighting force without the help of Spain and France, as we had enjoyed during the Revolution. So that didn't work. We even got our White House burned down from it. So for the next 100 or so years, the U.S. military machine was dedicated to either expanding our territory against Spain and Mexico. We voted against expanding against, actually we decided against expanding it into British Columbia as part of the Oregon Territory grab. 54-40 fight, you might have heard of that. But so instead of that, we decided to go against Mexico because the Southerners, like James K. Polk, was in charge of things. But so we had campaigns against Mexico to expand the territory of the United States. Our flimsy excuse was manifest destiny. And I, as a Mexican American, who's historically sensitive, and among others, I'm sure, will argue that the Civil War, since the Southern political strongmen, so supported campaigns against Mexico to annex territory, to spread slavery, that the Civil War ended up being retribution, just karmic retribution against the annexation of half of Mexico. Basically choked on the territory. The conflicts that resulted internally within the new United States led to the Civil War. But apart from that, against Spain to get not just Florida, as it was 70 years prior, but to get Cuba and Puerto Rico and the Philippines, we basically evicted Spain from the Western Hemisphere. We evicted the UK in part from South America by taking over their lordship over Venezuela when there was a dispute of the border between British Guyana and Venezuela. It was rather uncertain. This is like in 1903 or so. We went to war against Colombia. It was a short war, for sure, but the war was specifically to hand over one of their provinces to some independence people. That province was Panama. So Panama became an independent country, no longer part of Colombia. It was historically part of Colombia, historically part of the viceroyalty that was based in Bogota. But now it was, colonial times, but now it was independent country, and the people we put in there to rule it, of course, allowed us to take over and complete the Panama Canal project, which was, I guess very strategic, of course. France was very degraded within the New World at that point, since they didn't finish that project, and we did. Um, and up until, well, let's say, a couple of campaigns in the Dominican Republic, in Haiti, Brazil, but most notably also after during the Mexican Revolution, we had our guy in Mexico, northern Mexico, was Pancho Villa. Pancho Villa lost a battle against Carranza, one of the old guard dudes, and the United States switched their allegiance, transporting a number of Carranza's troops on our side of the border over to the west to face down Pancho Villa's troops that had to walk 1,000 or so miles through the northern Mexican desert in craggy landscape. So this Western troops defeated Pancho Villa. Pancho Villa's retribution was, of course, to invade and sack the town of Columbus, New Mexico, basically laid it to waste and killed a number of U.S. citizens that were, of course, on an open sand in the, line of the sand border from Mexican territory. And so our retribution was for General Pershing to go look around, go down through Mexico, through the northwestern part of Mexico, to find Pancho Villa and bring him to justice. But the further they went down, the more hostile the situation became to them, especially with respect to the population. The population, of course, did not betray the whereabouts of Pancho Villa. And Pershing had to give that up, but it gave the troops, the cavalry there, some good practice before their eventual entry into World War I, which was going on at the time already. And so, this doughboy represents a World War I soldier. We broke a stalemate. You know the story. This was a new set of, okay, so now we had established our empire, so the United States flipped from building its empire in its backyard, expanding, establishing its sphere of influence, and now asserting itself opportunistically among the community of the great powers. And not to exclude Guernica, or the Spanish Civil War that predated the World War II. It was a proxy war between communists and fascists. And we were on the fascist side. We were on the Nazi and Italian side because we did not want the communists to win. We were already anti-red by this point. But Hirohito and the Nazis made the mistake of challenging our economic supremacy. So, we fought a war on two fronts and cleaned up. But not without a number of all these guys giving their life from Shelby County, and about 400,000 of their friends from other counties within the fighting force. But this marks a very bright line in the history of our fight, of our fighting machine. Because, we know of Eisenhower, who had distinguished himself as a general of the whole NATO. And then as president, one of the fifth, sixth best presidents, depending on what historian you ask. Um, but obviously one of the very good ones. For many reasons, depends who you ask, though. What I learned in studies was that the campaigns for which we fought from here on in, from after the Second World War, were as Eisenhower would warn us in his departure speech before Kennedy was inaugurated. His farewell, he talked to us about the military-industrial complex. Our wars were no longer fought for the defense of the interests mainly of the economic supremacy of our economic champions. And one could argue, I guess, against Japan, maybe Germany, Nazi Germany, against our freedom. That was a legit threat to our freedom, to our independence and sovereignty. But we haven't had one since then, and before that, between then and the 1812, we hadn't had one. We hadn't had one. Nobody's coming here to mess with us, and they're still not going to come mess with us. Our wars not only were as much economic adventurism for our people who had investments abroad, or wanted to establish investments abroad, or wanted to keep China from getting the poppies and the lithium in Afghanistan. But for the actual war machine itself, the war machine itself became the economic interest. Every bullet that's fired, every plane that's replaced, every vehicle that's replaced, every contractor that's sent out to support the troops, every contractor that manufactures showers that electrocute the troops because they're not grounded properly. Those are checks written to people who make political donations. And you can't, we never hear from CNN, MSNBC, Fox News, Epoch Times. We never hear why exactly we have been in Afghanistan for 18 years. We never hear it. They never explain it. Because the benefactors are, in fact, including oil people, the benefactors are the advertisers. So they control a lot of the editorial content. And this is not limited to actual overt war, economic adventurism itself. We know Madam Secretary Hillary Clinton, I forgot the name of the gentleman who was president of Honduras, but he was evicted from his house in his pajamas by people we supported because he was installing socialist policies. Honduras fixed its country in spite of the Cold War BS we were engaged in against the Contras. No, against the Sandinistas in Honduras, and against rebels in Guatemala. So they fixed their country. They elect the right guy, and he makes things right for them, for the people to enjoy the benefits of the riches of Honduras, of the land and commerce, at the expense of the United Fruit Company United Fruit Company says, Madam Secretary, this guy's costing us a lot of money. Oh, okay. I got you. So he evicts the guy. They install the strongman favorable to us. We go through the OAS. The OAS is forced Organization of American States, like a mini UN for the West Hemisphere, based in Washington, D.C. And so we certify this guy who we install in Honduras. And he converts it into a literal hellhole where murder among civilians has a 90% utility rate. You get away with murder 90% of the time. And that is why we had the caravans, because it was that dangerous, and it was our fault. We did it. Our covert machine did it. We didn't require troops. Venezuela sits on reserves, I think, double the size of Saudi Arabia of oil, and their particular brand of oil is what Texas refineries, namely Koch brothers refineries, are geared towards: high sulfur crude. It ain't about him being a dictator. It ain't about him being a socialist. It's about him trying to nationalize, or nationalizing that stuff, his mineral reserves, for the benefit of his people, and raising taxes on all these folks who came over to Miami and Memphis and other places. Say, oh my gosh, Maduro is terrible. He's a terrible dictator like this, dictator that. We didn't even allow anybody to certify those elections because they were going to come out clean. The people wanted Maduro. They wanted socialism, because what preceded that. Also, don't forget how Trump disbanded the Iran peace deal. Look at the price at the pump, and look at the date of the Iran peace deal, and you will see why he revoked the Iran peace deal: to destabilize the supply of oil at the Strait of Hormuz, which raised the price. Supply demands. There's the supply end of it. So our oil people can dig up oil out of the sands of North Dakota, or have it piped down across the Great Plains from Canada and North Dakota to the Gulf Coast at a higher price. That's why. Why do we fight in Syria? We don't care about Syria, do we? Yeah, we do. It's basically the Russians want the Iranian folks, the Iranian pipeline, to carry its natural gas to the Mediterranean Sea, but across that little Red Sea, across the Arabian Sea. In Saudi Arabia, we want those guys to carry that natural gas, the same natural gas, on their pipelines over to the Mediterranean Sea. That's what it is. Just like that. It's that simple. So we try and turn Syria upside down so our guys can benefit from the natural gas. We try and blockade Venezuela. Corruption does not explain the fact that they have runaway inflation. There is no cash. There is no cash. They're not allowed to. We are preventing them from exporting their oil. They've got Colombia to the south, to the west, our friend. They've got Brazil to the south, our friend. They've got the UK in Guyana to the east, our friend. They have Aruba the Dutch oil, oil guys to the north, our friend. They are blockaded on 4 sides. They cannot export their oil, but they still pay to feed their people. That's what your CIA and your military is up to. And our guys come back from Afghanistan, shells of their former selves, for the purpose of lithium. They come back, shells of their former selves from Iraq for oil. We upend a democratically elected socialist in Bolivia, Evo Morales, to put in a clown woman who holds up the Bible to justify attacks against Quechua-speaking inhabitants of places that are, and non-Christian, therefore inhabitants of Bolivia that are blocking development of lithium and oil. Our military forces are doing the opposite of upholding our values. Our soldiers are grist for the mill. Anyway, I learned a few things at Brown University and Tufts University, and I'm sharing this with you. They're not doing this for our benefit, but they sure are doing a heck of a job hiding the expenses to conduct these operations. Unfortunately, sometime there will be another display here in Veterans Plaza, somewhere, for Afghanistan, hopefully not for Venezuela, hopefully not for Iraq, hopefully not for Syria, because those people deserve better. They don't need to be refugees because of our BS. Because we're benefiting from it. We don't have any benefit. We're not getting our dividend check from these companies, but they sure are getting their subsidies, and they sure are getting us to fight on their behalf. So think about it. Keep a watchful eye. There'd be more later.